Today on Inside Utah Politics, the race for U.S. Senate. Independent candidate Evan McMullin facing off against Senator Mike Lee. He's here to discuss the matchup and some of the big issues of the race.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
So we do begin this morning with independent candidate for U.S. Senate, Evan McMullin, here to discuss the race against Senator Lee. Great to have you back on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Great to be with you, Glenn.
The stage is set now. You've been able to campaign up to this point, but now it's official. So how do things change now that you look forward to the general knowing exactly who you're facing up against?
I think things won't change more than they will change, in the sense that I'm running a campaign to stand up to Washington's broken politics. Our country has really been engulfed in the politics of division and extremism recently over recent years. And it's weakening the country. It's hurting Utah. I believe Mike Lee has decided to embrace those kinds of broken politics, and it's time for us to offer an alternative as Utahns, and that's what we're campaigning to do. So I've asked Democrats, Republicans, Independents to join our coalition, and that's happening. Our coalition is building, and we like our prospects in the months ahead.
Talk about running as an independent. To my knowledge, the state of Utah has never sent an independent senator to Washington, D.C. How did that all come about? And at what point did you say, yeah, we can make this happen?
Well, other states have. We haven't as Utahns, but other states have. So this is totally doable. And in fact, now the race is a dead heat. So this is possible. And it's possible because a majority of Utahns want to replace Mike Lee, according to our polling. This is now a neck-and-neck race. We know that we have to build a coalition of principled Republicans, Democrats, and Independents who are willing to put country over party in order to prevail. And that just also happens to be the kind of leadership that Utah needs, I think, and the kind of leadership that the country needs from Utah. That's what we're building here. We're standing up to our broken politics and offering an alternative that I think can help our country move forward and overcome major challenges.
I haven't seen your internal polling, but you're also referring to a poll recently by the Hinckley Institute of Politics and Deseret News, which has you within about 4 votes. But in the back of a lot of minds, people are asking, will Utah really send an independent to Washington? So how do you answer that question and bring people to your side?
I think what we're seeing is that Utahns are ready for change. They are so tired of the broken politics. I mean, let's just start with the challenges we're facing here. Everybody knows them already, but let's mention them. You know, high gas prices. You go to the pump, you're paying $5 to $6 a gallon. Food is costing more. High cost of healthcare. We've dealt with that for a long time. We've got air quality issues, lack of water. The challenges are mounting. So Utahns want to see change. They see other leaders in our state and that we send to Washington working constructively to find solutions to major challenges. And we need that kind of leadership out of both of our senators. Mm-hmm. Not, we have one senator, Senator Romney, who I think works very constructively. If we prevail, I'll work very closely with him on a wide variety of issues. And then you have Senator Lee, who's made a name for himself being embracing the politics of division and extremism and getting very little done, if anything, for the state and the country. We've got to make a change in order to overcome those challenges.
Senator Lee in the primary, as of recording, had around 62% of the vote, 38% meaning did not vote for him. Are those people that you can target and that you think you can win over, that 38%?
I think we can. In fact, the vast majority of them already support us, and many of them have voted for me in the past. So we know them well. They've been a part of my political efforts for the last several years. But we're going to work hard to bring them into the coalition. They're essential parts of the broader coalition we're building to replace Mike Lee, yes, but also to stand up to Washington's broken politics. So we'll work very hard on that front, but we're optimistic because we've had the support of those voters in the past and we know them well.
You made a run for president in 2016, made a name for yourself here in the state of Utah as an alternative to former President Donald Trump. During that campaign, at the end of it, there were hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt that went unpaid. Last time I checked, it still stood right around $600,000. Talk about why that wasn't paid off and what a viewer should think of that, or a voter should think of that, if that is a concern to them.
Well, in 2016, I launched, as many of your viewers know, an emergency presidential campaign for a few months because I knew that the Republic was in peril. The end result of that was that Utah sent a clear message to the rest of the country that we're different and we know our politics are broken and they need to be fixed. I did that because no one else would do it. I'm proud of what we accomplished. Yes, it's unfortunate that we didn't win. There was little chance of that. And as most losing presidential campaigns do, we finished with some debt, much less than most other presidential campaigns, but still we did. I'm committed to paying that down, but now we're focused on the threat that we believe the country faces now, and that is the politics of division and extremism that are tearing us apart. Senator Lee needs to be replaced. Most Utahns want to do it. We're never going to overcome all these challenges we're facing: inflation, air quality, water, availability of water, if we don't send leaders to Washington who are going to hold the principle but still find common ground to solve problems. Another thing is this, our politics are broken because party bosses, special interest groups, and extremes have far too much influence. Senator Lee has received over $4 million from special interest groups. In our first quarter in the race, about 42% of the money he raised came from special interest groups. We've got to stand up to the broken system that we have and to the money in politics. I've committed to not taking any money from special interest groups or super PACs, and that stands in a stark contrast to what Lee is doing. And if you wonder, why isn't Lee representing you if you're a Utahn? It's because he's owned by these special interest groups. That's what we've got to change. That's what we're running to do.
I just want to highlight one thing you said there, though. You are still dedicated to paying that debt down from your 2016 presidential race.
I am. I'm dedicated to paying it down as we can. Now we are focused on replacing Mike Lee because we think that's absolutely vital.
You left the Republican Party before 2016 to run as an independent. So talk about your political philosophy. How do you define it? Are you a conservative at heart?
I'm a conservative like I always have been, and what I mean and what I've always meant by that is two things. Number one, one of the founders of conservatism, Sir Edmund Burke, I won't get too much into the weeds on who he was, but he believed that conservatism was about preserving our institutions, the institutions that protect liberty and justice for all. Abraham Lincoln had another view of conservatism, that it was about preserving our commitment to our founding ideals, because that is what is most critical to our ability to survive and thrive as a nation. So when I talk about being a conservative, it's about those things: preserving our system of self-government, our elections, the rule of law, or in the Lincolnian sense, our commitment to the truth that we are all created free and equal, and therefore we have leaders who are accountable to us through a representative government.
In 2016, you made it very clear you thought Roe v. Wade should be overturned. Now that the Supreme Court has done that, you've said that's not the most effective way forward. So where do you stand on that?
I'm pro-life, and I'm seeking ways that the country and our state can move forward constructively on a range of issues that have been tearing us apart for years. This is one of them. I'm worried about extremist bills that are being passed in Oklahoma and Texas and elsewhere, and I'm worried about the impacts of those extremist bills.
So what is the way forward from your philosophy?
Happy to talk about it. The way forward, and data is very clear on this, the way to lower abortion rates in America is to make contraception more available and to do more to support women, children, and families. That's what I think we need to do. This tug of war over the law is going to continue forever. One party's elected, then the other party, and they're going to go back and forth like that forever. It's going to destabilize the country. What we can do is lend a helping hand. Again, make contraception more available, help women, children, and families. That's what lowers abortion rates in America.
Okay, we have about 30 seconds left. I want to talk to you about this gun reform bill. You said you would support it the way it went through. Here in the state of Utah, part of that bill is to encourage states to enact red flag laws. That has been tried up on Capitol Hill the last couple of years, and it did not pass. In fact, the state representative who ran it ended up losing his seat in convention. The red flag portion of the bill, do you support that being implemented here in the state of Utah?
Well, first of all, I'm a gun owner myself. I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment because I think it's important to our ability to protect our freedoms. And so that's where I stand on the fundamental issue. I also think that, yes, we need to keep weapons out of violent criminals' hands, and we've got to find a way to do it. What I liked about what the bill did is that it deferred to the states. It didn't force that on the states. It wasn't a federal program, but it turned to the states and it said, here's funding, here's support for this if you do this. So I think that that's the right approach. But this is the key point, Glenn. We can protect our basic rights to own, to bear arms, and I think those are essential, and also protect the lives of our children, our loved ones, and our neighbors. So we can do both, and we need to do both. And for those who say, you know what, you can't make any changes to the laws, or our rights are going to be taken away. If we keep thinking that way and our children keep getting killed at schools, we are going to face even more opposition to our Second Amendment rights than we do now. So we've got to find a way forward that's productive. I think we can.
All right, we're going to have to end it on that note. Appreciate your time.
Thank
and
you,
we will
Glenn.
be following this race through November.
Thank you.
Still to come, President Biden calling on Democrats to raise their voice and vote following the latest rulings from the Supreme Court. Our panel is going to weigh on how it could impact the election a little later. The White House says securing the release of WNBA star Brittany Griner from Russia custody is a top priority for the president. Griner, a Houston native who has been detained in Russia since her arrest 4 months ago, wrote a letter to the president on Monday asking him to do more to bring her home. Washington correspondent Anna Warnicki reports on the negotiations on a possible swap deal.
Wednesday, President Biden told WNBA star Brittany Griner's wife he is working to bring Brittany home. The conversation came just 2 days after Griner sent President Biden a handwritten letter from a Moscow prison. The White House says the president also penned a letter to Griner in return.
This is something on which he is personally engaged on a daily basis.
State Department spokesperson Ned Price says Russia wrongly detained Griner in February after authorities claimed they found cannabis oil in her luggage. If Griner is convicted on the drug charges she faces, she could spend a decade behind bars. But Bill Browder, a financer and political activist who exposed a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme orchestrated by Russian officials, says Russia won't release Griner without something in return.
All they're doing is trying to figure out which hostages have more value. How do they determine value? They determine how upset the American people get by the hostage taking.
Browder says Russian media has expressed interest in a prisoner exchange involving Victor Bout, a Russian arms dealer known as the Merchant of Death.
He's in U.S. prison. He's responsible for thousands, if not many more, tens of thousands of deaths with the arms that he supplied to different rebels in different regions of the world.
In Washington, I'm Anna Warnicki.
President Biden recognizing 4 military heroes by giving them the Medal of Honor. The gesture is meant to thank them for unique acts of bravery during their service. Washington correspondent Hannah Brandt takes us inside the ceremony.
The Medal of Honor is the nation's most prestigious decoration for military service, and President Biden says each man earned the award by going beyond the call of duty.
They stood in the way of danger, risked everything, literally everything, to defend our nation and our values.
The president awarded the medals to the late Staff Sergeant Edward Kaneshiro, Specialist 5 Dwight Birdwell, Specialist 5 Dennis Fujii, and Major John Duffy. And he recounted how each of them risked their lives to save fellow service members during the Vietnam War more than 50 years ago.
But time has not diminished their astonishing bravery, their selflessness in putting the lives of others ahead of their own, and the gratitude that we as a nation owe them.
The president says the recognition is not only well-deserved, but also long overdue.
We're setting the record straight. We're upgrading the awards of 4 soldiers who perform acts of incredible heroism.
President Biden says Congress helped make this moment happen by ordering a review of historic actions by Asian Americans, Native Americans, and Pacific Islanders who served in the Vietnam War to make sure all our country's heroes are acknowledged.
To ensure that the United States lives up to our promises, that for those who give their best for our country, we'll always, always give our best to you.
President Biden also took a moment to honor Woody Williams, a veteran who died last week. He was the last surviving World War II Medal of Honor recipient. At the White House, I'm Hannah Brandt.
Coming up, back to the race for U.S. Senate. Can Evan McMullin pull off the upset? Our panel weighs in after the break. Turning now to some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have Salt Lake County Councilwoman Amy Winder-Newton and House Minority Leader Brian Keene. Great to have both of you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Evan McMullin was a guest at the top of the show. I want to start off with the U.S. Senate race. Councilwoman, let's start with you. Can this be competitive? And if so, what are the keys for McMullin in making it that way?
Well, I think it will be interesting and one of the more interesting races that we've had in Utah for the U.S. Senate. I don't think McMullin's going to be able to pull it off. And I've got 4 reasons why. The first one is he said he will not caucus with anyone. I think Republicans especially are going to see that as a disadvantage. Right now, they're seeing somebody who has endorsed Joe Biden's America, and they're going to want somebody who can give every vote to lower taxes, less regulation, energy independence, and so I just don't see that happening. The second reason, I think we take for granted that we think Becky Edwards and Ally Isom voters are going to cross over and vote for McMullin. I just don't see that happening. I see the majority of their supporters voting for the party nominee. The third thing, I think that McMullin's going to have a hard time with the trust factor. People saw him in the 2016 presidential election. He talked about issues that were important to him there, and we're not seeing the same Evan McMullin in this necessarily, and so he's kind of a policy chameleon in a way, and I think that's going to make people really nervous. And then the last thing that I don't think we're hearing a lot about, but as the race continues, I think we'll hear more on, it's the committee assignments. The majority of the Senate work is done in committees, and those committees are determined in caucuses. And what worries me is if you have somebody who is an independent who's not caucusing, are they going to get a committee assignment? Because that's a big deal for Utah. We do not want our voice diminished. So for those 4 reasons, I just think he's going to struggle to get the majority of Utahns to support him.
What are the keys here if Evan McMullin is going to be successful and potentially win this race?
Well, you had close to 40% of Republicans saying they didn't want to vote for Mike Lee. And I don't know of any reason why those 38% that voted for Becky Edwards or Ally Isom wouldn't feel comfortable switching over and voting for Evan McMullin. McMullin got a significant percentage of votes when he ran for president in 2016 out of Utah. He was on the ballot here. He is known in that sense, and I think a lot of conservatives and Republicans are very comfortable voting for him. And of course, you're going to have a lot of unaffiliated voters. You're going to have a lot of Democrats who want to see anybody but Mike Lee in office. I think that some of the details that Amy has talked about are important once you're an insider, but for Utahns, I think most of them are going to be noticing and focusing on other things that Mike Lee has in a more high-profile way got some problems with. He's so closely affiliated with the former president. I don't think that Donald Trump is going to be wearing well as time goes on, and of course he hasn't worn particularly well across the country and in Utah since he left office. My expectation is that as more information comes out from the January 6th committee, that we're going to see more problematic behavior and concerns exist about just how close Mike Lee's affiliation with the Trump administration was and how undermining of basic constitutional principles he was. And I just think Utahns are going to be looking for another face. Now, one of the reasons that we have Evan McMullin versus Mike Lee, of course, is because Democrats made a tactical choice to not put anyone on the ballot. I think that was just pragmatism in action, and I think what you're going to see is the great majority of Democrats coming out to vote for Evan McMullin.
Amy, a clear strategy from the McMullin campaign has been, and I suspect will continue to be, to tie the senator with the former president, noting that in 2020 the former president did still win 58% of the vote here in the state of Utah. Is that a smart strategy?
I think the more time goes on, the more irrelevant our former president becomes, and I think Utahns aren't going to necessarily see that. I mean, those who are watching the January 6th Commission maybe, but I think the majority of Utahns aren't going to necessarily think about that as they're making their decision. I will say this, I would like to thank McMullin for running and for getting the Democrat nomination, if you will, because not having a Democrat at the top of that ticket I think hurts down ballot Democrats. I think it helps those of us Republicans running this year who know that progressive Democrats are frustrated that their party didn't nominate somebody. And so in some ways, I think it will affect even other races in Utah to that extent. That was a key point in that discussion at your convention, Representative. Talk about that. Will those, because this was a 43% of Democratic delegates voted not to go that route. Will they be energized in November to come out and vote?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that I've been most impressed with is Cale Weston, who was running for the Democratic nomination. accepted the vote of the committee of the convention and said, if that's what the Democrats want to do, I'm going to support that move. He's continued to be very active in Democratic Party politics. He's continued to encourage Democrats to turn out and vote and to support Evan McMullin and to vote for down ballot Democrats. So I think Democrats are going to need to be unified on this issue for purposes of this particular election. My hope is that they come out. There may be some things about Evan McMullin, who is a former Republican, that a lot of Democrats aren't really going to like, but the reality is he's not seeking to undermine actively the Constitution of the United States of America in the way that we saw Senator Lee doing for weeks on end, as he, by his own admission, was saying 12, 14 hours a day. And so I think that Utahns are going to say, we don't want someone as our senator to continue in office who compares Donald Trump to Captain Moroni. I've had a number of members of the LDS Church say that they were greatly put off by that and offended by it. And I think that's going to be something that Evan McMullin reminds Utahns of.
All right. I did ask the senator that very question last week, and I just want to throw it out there. He did say that doing that was a mistake and something he wishes he wouldn't have done at the time. I want to get to one other quick thing real fast, because this is really playing out to be a fascinating dynamic to me. So we have this election year where one party is in control of the White House and both chambers of Congress. Typically, you'll see the chambers of Congress switch in that kind of year. We also have an economy where, you know, we can argue whose fault it is, but clearly polls show that most Americans hold the president responsible. But then we have all these rulings coming down from the Supreme Court, and that really seems to be firing up the Democratic base. Amy, let's start with you. How do you see this all balancing out in November?
Well, I know we have passionate people about the abortion issue and people that are mad. Whether or not that switches who they would have voted for, I think, is the question. I don't know that that's as top of mind as the economy is. Just because if you look at everything that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, the economy is in your face all the time. When you go to the gas pump and you're seeing these higher gas prices, when you're going to the grocery store and you're trying to feed your family, I think Americans are going to remember that. That's the stuff that's more emotional to them because it hits them every day. It's something that they're dealing with day in and day out. And when they look at the economy and the struggles there, I think that's going to be a stronger case for those persuadables that were in the middle to vote Republican this year instead of vote Democrat. And I think it still is going to be a stronger, more compelling issue for the midterm elections.
All right, Brian, your thoughts on that?
Well, Republicans have spent 4 decades working as hard as they could to encourage people to get out and vote for Republicans so that they could get the courts and the makeup of our federal judiciary changed in a way that would get Roe v. Wade overturned. Now the dog has got the bus. The dog caught the bus, and what we're going to see is Republicans regretting the fact that they've been so aggressive in putting in place an ultra-conservative Supreme Court majority, supermajority, that will basically intrude on the most personal private rights we have as Utahns and as United States citizens. I honestly think this is going to be something that Republicans and this Supreme Court will regret, because this relates to the most personal private behavior that we have as individuals. In Utahns, we've always prided our libertarian instincts, our commitment to autonomy, our commitment to our own agency, freedom, and liberty, and this strikes at the core of those very fundamental things. So I really do think that you're going to have people coming out in the way that they behave in their voting patterns come November in a way that is different than they have voted in the past, because they recognize we've got to get away from this intrusive kind of approach that Republicans across this country have led us into. It
will be interesting to watch. Really appreciate both of you being here, and thanks so much for your insight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break. We leave you now with a look at what's on the radar in the world of politics. Utah counties will certify their primary election results this week. Board of Canvassers meetings will take place on Tuesday. Winning candidates now turning their attention to the general election, which is set for Tuesday, November 8th. Thanks so much for making us part of your Sunday morning. We hope to see you again next week as we go inside Utah politics.